Hey, I'm Matt at Mr. Maple.
And I'm Tim at Mr. Maple.
We're here in Maplewood Gardens to talk to you about one of our most commonly asked questions. The topic for today's video is, do Japanese maples have flowers?
We get this question all the time, and I think one of the reasons we get this is because of the Indian mallow, often referred to as the flowering maple. While that's an annual that produces a certain type of bloom, Japanese maples are quite different.
Yeah, that one tricks people a good bit. I think Ed Shin gets everybody every year with that one looking like an Acer pictum. It's got such a cool leaf to it, but it is an annual. So that one has some crazy variegation on them too. So sometimes those will come out and you'll be like, wow, what is that? What kind of maple is that? But it's actually an annual, not a maple. So Japanese maples all have the potential to flower. Now there is a lot of different things that can cause flowers to be lesser in certain years. And so we're gonna show you a couple of the flowers on this Japanese maple behind us. This is a glowing embers, so it's an Acer palmatum glowing embers. And this one consistently flowers pretty good for us in the garden. And we'll show you what that kind of bloom looks like here in early April.
Now the blooms on Japanese maples are often much smaller and in a cluster. And so they're a little different than what people are thinking about typically with blooms on Japanese maples. Now they do provide some spring interest, and later on many of these may go on to produce seed. Now not all that seed is going to be viable just because Japanese maples are hybrids. But Japanese maples themselves do flower, and they're kind of attractive in the spring. Give them something a little bit different, and it's more of that nuance addition to the garden rather than a big flashy show.
Now, all Japanese maples have that potential for flower. A late frost may take out a lot of the flowers a certain year. You know what, a late cold spell may actually induce more flowers. So there's a lot of factors there on how much your plant is flowering. Oftentimes, Japanese maples will have kind of a green leaf and a greenish flower to them, so they're not as noticeable on a plant. It may have flowers on it, and it may just not have caught your eye with all that fresh foliage or all that bright variegation. It may not be the part of the plant that drew your eye in the quickest, but there's often some blooms hiding out there. Now, a lot of the cultivars that have more reddish style flowers are very easy to spot. So we actually got this glowing embers behind us here because it has a red bloom, so we can kind of show you a little bit more of what that looks like. Now, there's different types of flowers. Now, Acer japonicums are very prevalent in their flowers. So they're very easy to spot too because Acer japonicums are typically more green in color, and the flowers are very bright red, and they're a more prominently sized flower. So they're very easy to catch that red tassel flower hanging down. Now, there's a ton of different plants that can fit into the category of Japanese maples. We'll actually be doing a podcast about what is a Japanese maple and going into a deep dive with that topic. So there's some other plants that may fit into this, like snakebark maples that have very prominent flowers. You know, some things that people like Acer truncatum, huge flowers, actually a Chinese maple, but a very large flower. We're actually in western North Carolina. That's popular for the native Acer rubrum, and our mountains right now are just ablaze with that Acer rubrum flower.
Now, Acer palmatum is one of those plants that it typically takes about 6 years for the meristem to develop to produce flowers. So the plant typically is an older plant until you actually start to get flowers on a plant itself. And these flowers, they're very few and far between at a young age, and as they develop and get a more mature specimen, you may get more flowers on a tree in your landscape and garden.
Now, something you may not even notice, like flowers on a plant like Shishigashira, they have very small seeds. They also have very small flowers. So while the flowers may be prevalent, and they may actually be there if you know what to look for, they may be really hard to find on the plant as well. So here we have an up close look at those Japanese maple flowers. Now again, this one's on the green upright called glowing embers, and it does predominantly flower for us, and it actually seeds pretty well too. But you can kind of see this time of year, it hadn't gotten hit by any late frost, and there's still some flowers very prevalent here in the garden. And again, Japanese maples aren't selected for their flowers, but they can be a fun thing to notice if you know what to look for. So while Japanese maples don't really have that prominent of a flower or a flower that might be a key feature, the foliage is typically the feature that really attracts you to Japanese maples. There are some things in that maple family that have some outstanding flowers. I'm actually here in the garden with Acer truncatum golden dragon. So this is a shantung maple. It's actually a Chinese maple, and it has some very prominent flowers on in the early spring. And you get I think, some great interest on these. The golden dragon actually puts on a lot of flushes of just that bright yellow flower. I've seen a lot of different color flowers. It's actually interesting. Maybe more should be done with selecting some of those rubrums and some of those shantungs for flower colors. I know Keith has one called Flower God we offer from time to time. I'll have to do maybe a video on the flowers on that when we get one out. But you see this truncatum has some amazing flowers on it, and that golden yellow really adds something to that early spring garden. We hope you've enjoyed this quick video answering the question, do Japanese maples have flowers? And while Japanese maples may not be selected for their flowers, they certainly can all have that possibility to have a flower there in the garden.
Yeah, flowers on Japanese maples are one of those things that just give it a little bit extra, something a little bit extra in the landscape and garden. But Japanese maples are primarily known for the foliage that really gives different colors throughout the seasons.
There's so many cultivars of Japanese maple where that spring foliage is the flower. You know, that's the part of the tree that really excites you, that really fires you up.
We hope you've enjoyed today's video. Please make sure to share this with your gardening friends. Make sure to like our video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and sign up for our weekly emails on MrMaple.com.
Take care.
God bless.
And have a good day.